if they are going to be using it as a requirement, and as I think John mentioned here, per UCI's search policies, the statement will be a factor in determining the shortlist and finalists. Again, for a cancer researcher. Forgive me if I don't really give a damn. For a cancer researcher, I don't really give a damn about something like this. I wouldn't give a damn about those kinds of statements. If you're doing it on the side and you're doing it yourself and it's important to you, that's great. Don't get me wrong. I don't care about your ideological bent. But if I were to have cancer, I wouldn't really care about what kind of advocacy things or activist things you're doing if you're supposed to be a cancer researcher. Going to talk about something else to start this week, but there was something that came to mind that came up recently that I thought deserved a little bit more attention. But to get to that, I'm going to highlight a couple of things. First, those of you who watch this channel long enough, you know what I think of DEI statements, that they are ideological litmus tests, and not really about diversity of thought at all. And one of the people who's done a job of pretty well demonstrating that is John Saylor, with the National Association of Scholars. And so he has put forward a number of articles several times, including such things as the evaluations done with DEI statements. The evaluations are embedded below. Readers are encouraged to peruse the documents for themselves, but a few of the DEI strengths and weaknesses that search committees named are worth highlighting here. And as always, all of this will be linked in the description of the video for you. Candidates' weaknesses include mention that DEI is not an issue because he respects students and treats them equally. This indicates a lack of understanding of equity and inclusion issues. Poor understanding of the difference between equity and equality, even on redirect, which suggested rather superficial understanding of DEI more generally. Wasn't a lot of discussions about the nuances between DE and I and how they're interrelated. Didn't distinguish between international and domestic students with their DEI needs, conflation of international with diversity without explaining any subtlety. Diversity was only ever defined as country of origin and notably never mentioned women. Not during DEI meeting, but observed multiple examples of microaggressions towards women faculty, including assuming one junior faculty was a graduate student and minimizing the differences of women in the U.S. compared to worse situations elsewhere. Meanwhile, strengths include some awareness level of the problem, lived experience with axes of diversity growing up in the caste system in India. These are all examples here. This comes from Texas Tech University, and how those DEI statements were deliberately used to negate folks who otherwise might have been really great candidates in here. So documents and the like are all present here. I am not dwelling on that here. But to make a point, John Saylor's work is definitely got its prominence in that he is actually quite able to produce results. And not long after that article, very similar to this one, was published in the Wall Street Journal, Texas Tech decided they're not going to do that anymore. In February 7th of 2023 was the decision for that. Texas Tech University's faculty hiring practices will always emphasize disciplinary excellence and the ability of candidates to support our priorities in student success, impactful scholarship, and community engagement. Recently, we learned of a department that required a DEI statement in addition to the usual applicant materials as part of the faculty search. We immediately withdrew this practice and initiated a review of hiring procedures across all colleges and departments. We will withdraw the use of these statements and evaluation rubrics if identified. So, so there is that. And he has likewise had similar success. Texas A&M is another one, in pointing out these DEI statements and then seeing them removed. This is, of course, Texas A&M University, Bryan College Station, Chancellor John Sharp today directed, this is March 3rd, directed all universities and agencies in the Texas A&M University system to remove DEI statements from their employment or admission practices. No university or agency in the A&M system will admit any student nor hire any employee based on any factor other than merit. Now, I know I said a couple times at the time that I didn't necessarily trust that this was going to be exactly that those were just going to go away altogether, which they should, frankly. They are not necessarily relevant to anything. And as I said, they're political litmus tests, and I think that's fairly well shown by the fact that you're grading people based upon their opinions in a particular issue here. But the problem with where this comes from in a postmodernist philosophy is that things get renamed. Things get renamed, put out there again in new fashion, and as a result, they don't necessarily go away. You just try and rename and hide them in different ways, potentially. And I'm going to say potentially with this because I'm not sure. Either way, regardless, having a requirement for a statement on somebody's opinions on an issue or beliefs about some or their social justice activism outside or even part of their work should have no bearing rather on whether or not someone gets hired for a position that's irrelevant. And it's also, as I have said a few times, hiring someone because they make a statement into the affirmative of sharing your own preconceived beliefs is really not being inclusive of diverse perspectives at all. And so that's my point to that. And that is when we come to this. John Saylor points this out from UC Irving. Hiring a professor of genitourinary cancer, which I don't know what that is, one requirement for applying is an inclusive excellence activities statement. Per UCI's search policies, the statements will be a factor in determining the shortlist and finalists again for a cancer researcher. This is John Saylor's tweet with the photos here earlier today. However, it is quite legitimate, actually. And it has been open for a while, as it were, but I just want to make sure that was quite the same, or this was going to get embarrassing. Endowed professorship in genitourinary cancer. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Biological Chemistry School of Medicine, UC Irvine. The salary position, 102 to 218.5. Posted UC salary scale set the minimum pay determined by rank and step at appointment. The important item is right here. Inclusive excellence activities statement. Statement addressing how past and or potential contributions to inclusive excellence will advance UCI's commitment to inclusive excellence. See GAR guidance on writing an inclusive excellence statement. Now, where is that? Well, here it is. Guidance for writing inclusive excellence activities statement. Self-statements that explain your contributions to inclusive excellence. Define what the hell you mean by that. I gotta ask. Define what the hell you actually mean by that. In the areas of service, teaching, research, creative activity can be helpful to review committees. A few sentences about your knowledge and commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion may be included, but should not be the majority of the statement. So, this is where I wonder if, weaseling around a few things. These statements are most useful when they include specific examples of your activities, including a discussion of the outcomes of activities engaged in and how this influences future planning is also helpful. Less helpful statements might focus primarily on personal beliefs or previous life experiences, merely pointing to the diverse student body in courses rather than displaying how the faculty member has proactively supported those students. List names of URM mentees rather than explain the faculty member's specific recruitment or retention efforts or refer to required work such as writing letters of recommendation for diverse people. That is such a horrific thing to good grief. Rather than explaining how the work was beyond the faculty member's regular responsibilities. Describe actions you have taken to support and advance diversity, equity, inclusion in teaching. See, this is the thing. A few sentences about your knowledge, but this is actually different than a DEI statement because it's demanding to know that you have done specific actions that they're interested in. That's actually where it's different from a DEI statement, I think. Same kind of vein, you're still asking for something that's based on that's basically an ideological litmus test. It's just actually a way for them to check whether or not you're committed, perhaps. Inclusive excellence related to service, recruitment and retention, organization of or engagement in seminars, conferences, institutions that address concerns of underrepresented groups, services and committees at serving underrepresented communities and advancing inclusive excellence. Awards and commendations related to teaching, use or development of pedagogies addressing different learning styles, teaching in programs that serve underrepresented groups. So let's see, inclusive excellence related to research and creative activities. This is of most interest to me, actually. Describe your scholarly creative work that includes advancing underrepresented groups. Contributions may include, but are not limited to, addressing barriers facing underrepresented groups in access to education, healthcare, economy. Describe your scholarly... Okay, hold it. Describe your scholarly or creative work that includes advancing underrepresented groups. Contributions may include, but are not limited to, addressing barriers facing underrepresented groups in access to education, healthcare, economy, social mobility, or participation in creative endeavors, studying programs to understand and enhance patterns of participation and advancement, creating knowledge of diverse cultural and historic experiences, particularly in reference to underrepresented groups. I got a question. If you were to say this about a physicist, if you were to ask this of a physicist or a chemist, where just about everything they do is in a lab working with chemicals or equipment, how do you even get that? How do you even get to that? Then it still seems very much like an ideological litmus test. Oh, for an example of assessing a faculty contribution to inclusive excellence, please click here. Assessing faculty contributions. Okay. Inclusive excellence, an example of what they want. I was invited to Program X, one of the leading research institutes in Mexico, by student X, who had been my UCI teacher training program. He now has a faculty position, also in charge. I gave 2 seminars as part of a 3-day program on creating inclusive learning classrooms. I also led, again, what is meant by inclusive? I also led a workshop for 30 graduate students to teach theory and practice of using demonstrations in a classroom. Started with the team building exercise. I think this was instrumental in students engaged in participation. Ran a workshop with team building. Hers was effective in a group where not everyone could speak Spanish. Since body language and other clues, learning a new team building exercise that encouraged inclusivity was extremely informative, and I used the exercise effectively in a workshop for another group. This is an example of an effective example because it is evidence-based, includes the assessment of the contribution's impact, and explicitly states the faculty's role in the activity and overall effort and time. That's a remarkably tame one, actually. It doesn't really necessarily have a whole lot of anything in it connected to what they would actually be looking for. Leastways, I don't think so. Specific. Okay. But that's the point to make with this, is that a lot of this, almost nothing related to the merit of a person's research. And that's where I tend to have my primary concern with this, is that where are you teaching about doing research yourself? If you're mentoring graduate students, where are you actually doing research yourself? And how does that relate? Any of this relate to being in physics? It sounds like you're asking them to, I don't know, be doing things that follow a specific ideological bent, which is not necessarily appropriate. Even if I fundamentally disagree with a person's ideological bent, that's not the reason I would be interested in hiring them. So this seems to me to be a renaming of DEI statements, but all the more so because now it's about what specifically have you actually been doing? Can we see that up front? So, yeah, I don't like this necessarily. And if they are going to be using it as a requirement, and as I think John mentioned here, per UCI's search policies, the statement will be a factor in determining the shortlist and finalists. Again, for a cancer researcher. Yeah, forgive me if I don't really give a damn. For a cancer researcher, I don't really give a damn about something like this. I wouldn't give a damn about those kinds of statements. If you're doing it on the side and you're doing it yourself and it's important to you, that's great. Don't get me wrong. I don't care about your ideological bent. But if I were to have cancer, I wouldn't really care about what kind of advocacy things or activist things you're doing if you're supposed to be a cancer researcher. Just me. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door. Comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. Stay curious, everybody.